Today I'm going to be going through different styles of decoupage from beginner level to advanced and everything in between. Decoupaging paper onto forgotten treasures can really liven up your home. And there's a number of decoupage techniques that I've learned over the years, and today I'd like to take you on a deep dive into one of my favorite pastimes.
It's so hard when you're decoupaging these to get into all those intricate little spots, and with this technique, it solves all of that.
So you're going to size your napkin to fit your words so it looks nice, and then we're ready to put the Mod Podge on. You want a pretty good liberal coat over the whole piece. I like to take my finger and go all the way around the edges of each letter and make sure that the napkin is adhered really well. And then we're going to just trim off all the excess napkin. You don't want a whole lot left around the edges. And we're ready to start burning off all of that extra napkin, and you'll see it just kind of burns off all that napkin that's around the edge and leaves a napkin wherever there was Mod Podge on the letter. And now I'm going to work on these middle pieces. I like just to take a pair of scissors, just poke a hole in it, and then light it with a lighter, and you'll see it just will smooth out all that area. And if you don't have enough Mod Podge out to the edge of your letters, it will burn that napkin too. So that's why it's so important when you're putting the Mod Podge on to make sure that you have it right to the edge of each letter. Okay, now I'm going to work on the next one, and I decided that I want to have the background white. I find the napkin pops a little bit better. The first one I didn't paint, but these last three I did, and I've just painted them with some chalk paint. You want to make sure the paint is completely dry before you do this step. And I'm going to just decoupage a napkin on just like I did in the first one. And it's so important to make sure that you clean up your work area before you do the next step. We don't need to be catching a craft room on fire or setting the fire alarm off, so just use caution and safety. And it's all done, and see how intricate that is? And it just formed to that word perfectly. And now on to the next one, and I love this floral napkin. I think it's going to look really great on this word. All done? Nice and crisp looking letters. Now this one I've just laid flat on my metal table so I can kind of videotape it a little bit better, and you can see how it just forms right into all those letters. And if you have a metal table like this, then you don't have to worry about hanging onto it and burning any fingers either. They're all finished. I'm going to seal them up with some polyacrylic sealer, and I remember what I said, this was game changer. So if you haven't tried this out, you gotta try it. Head to the dollar store, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, grab some of these words, get out your favorite napkins, and give this a try. A true crafter has all kinds of scrapbooking paper in their stash, but they're thick and they're hard to mold around your projects. I'm going to show you a hack today of how you can use up that scrapbooking paper and turn it into perfect paper to decoupage with. And the trick is packing tape. Take the piece of scrapbooking paper that you want to use to decoupage with, lay it facing down on your table, and then get packing tape and lay it all the way across that piece of scrapbooking paper, right down to the very bottom, and you're overlapping it just a little bit. And get a credit card and really press that tape in really well. And then peel the tape off, starting at the bottom, up, one piece at a time, and you can see how it's removing a layer of that paper and creating a thinner piece of scrapbooking paper. And you're going to repeat that process, removing the tape until you get to the top of your scrapbooking paper. Now it's thinner, but it might not be still thin enough. So you can go back in and you can add another layer of tape, making it thin as you need for your project. I also like to save the tape that I've taken off because you can add that into your mixed media projects. So just tuck it aside in a little drawer and use it up later. I'm going in for my second layer, and you can see how it's still removing a layer of that paper. This is such a great hack that opens up so many possibilities to decoupaging. It's really expensive if you're going to buy napkins or specialty decoupage paper when you can make your own with your scrapbooking paper. This will also work with wallpaper. So when you're at the thrift store next time, look through the papers and see if there's things that you can use that you can make thinner to decoupage with. Now this is just a plain piece of computer paper. I've printed one of my graphics on it, and we're gonna make it thinner so it's going to be easier to decoupage with. And then you can put it on your DIY projects. So give this hack a try the next time you're ready to decoupage. Today I'm going to show you 5 different ways that you can decoupage. There are so many different ways and so many different techniques. You kind of just have to play around with it and see what works best for you. But the first step to any decoupage project is to only work with 1 ply of napkin. So you want to make sure that you take, whether it's 2 ply or a 3 ply napkin, you want to make sure that you take them apart and only decoupage with the top piece. Now, another little trick that I like to do with my napkins is, these ones are 3 ply. The middle ply has a little bit of the color leached through. So I'm not able to really use that one for another craft project, but I save these because they're great for cleaning up messes. So I always set those aside in a pile. But with this one, I always save these because I custom make my own napkins. If you can't find designs for napkins, you can always make your own. So I always save these and I tuck them away in a pile to use them. So today I'm going to show you how to decoupage on wood. I've got some wooden pieces, wooden signs that I've made. These are just painted with chalk paint. I find it's best to decoupage on top of a light colored paint. If these were painted black and you put them, it would probably be okay on these napkins, but if you were to have the background black with these, the black would show through. Because the napkins become a little bit transparent when you decoupage with them. So I always, a little tip, always like to paint my project in a light colored paint before I decoupage. The other thing that I always like to do is I always like to press my napkins with an iron before I decoupage them. They always have these creases in them, and I always like to get rid of those because it makes it a lot easier to work with. I've picked these napkins up at HomeSense. I love the graphics on them, and that's what I'm going to use today for today's project. When I'm pressing my napkins, you want to do it under a towel or a heat pad, and I always like to put parchment paper on top of the napkin before I press it. Not wax paper, make sure it's parchment paper, and then just take the iron and just get all of those little wrinkles out. The first method that I'm going to show you is the iron-on method, and all of these I'm showing you on wood today. They will work on other surfaces too, but I just wanted to kind of focus on decoupaging on wood. So you're just going to put a liberal amount over your whole project, set it aside, and let the Mod Podge completely dry. So that's all covered. I'm going to set it aside. Now that first coat is dried, and my preference is to put 2 coats on before I do the iron on. I just put a really light coat of that second coat of Mod Podge on before I do the iron on transfer. This is kind of just optional. I just find that it works the best for me having the 2 coats of the Mod Podge on. Again, set it aside and we're going to let that dry. The Mod Podge is completely dry. I'm going to place the napkin exactly where I want it. And then you're going to place some parchment paper over top of it. And you want your iron set at the highest setting with no steam. You don't want any steam coming out of your iron. And then you're just going to make sure that napkin doesn't move. And I like to do every 2 or 3 seconds, just kind of push it along that napkin really carefully and let that Mod Podge melt right into that napkin and adhere to the wood. And then once you get done, I like to just pull up the parchment, make sure that it's working. Yep, it's working perfect. And I'm just gonna go over it again just to make sure that it is adhered really well again. Every 2 seconds, just kind of move it along. And this one works fantastic. Never have any bubbles or wrinkles when I'm using this technique. And once you're finished, there's no drying time. It's good to go, other than the initial, waiting for the initial Mod Podge to dry, but it's all finished and it's adhered. Now, when you're decoupaging, you don't want to have a whole lot of extra napkin. So I always like to pick a spot where I like the pattern the best. And I think I like this right here. And then cut your napkin just a little bit bigger than your project. And it makes it a little bit easier to work with. And you're not fumbling around with a great big bunch of napkin that's going to wrinkle on you easier. So just cut it down a little bit bigger than the size of your project. And now I'm going to show you how to decoupage with cling wrap or saran wrap. This is a really great technique for getting rid of bubbles and wrinkles. And you're just going to paint on your Mod Podge. Now, you don't want a real thick coat. If you put too much on, it makes it a lot more difficult to deal with. Just a light coat just to cover your whole surface. And then you're going to just pick up your napkin and very carefully, now you can't lift this up after you push it down, so put it right where you want it. Just gently tap it with your fingers. And then if you get a piece of the saran wrap, you can just tap it in. And as you're doing that, it's getting rid of all the wrinkles and the bubbles and making a nice smooth surface. And you can just go over it until they're all out. This works fantastic on smaller pieces too, where you have to get into little corners and stuff and press it out. There, and that worked perfect. Now we're just gonna set it aside and let it dry. Next method is a glue stick. These work really well for decoupaging. These ones I just picked up at the dollar store. You don't need a real fancy glue stick, and you're just gonna rub it over your whole project, getting right out to the edges. You wanna make sure you have that adhering to the edges, and rub it all over. And then you're just gonna pick up your napkin, place it exactly where you want it, and just lightly tap it out. And again, with this type of decoupage, you can also go back with your saran wrap and just press out any of those wrinkles, and it works fabulous with the glue stick too. And that's working really good, getting lots of the wrinkles out. And it's that easy. Next method to decoupage is using saran wrap underneath. And you just take off a little piece of saran wrap the same size as your piece of wood. And you want to lay it down nice and flat. And then you want to cut off the excess. You don't want a whole lot hanging off the edges. So just trim it up a little bit around the edges. I'm going to flip this around, make it a little bit easier. And this is a really great technique if you're doing really small pieces and trying to decoupage on them. And it's quick and fast. There's no dry time. As soon as you've finished it, it's ready to go. So we're gonna lay that nice and flat. You're gonna lay your napkin on top of it, exactly where you want it. And then you're gonna get that piece of parchment paper, and you're gonna lay it right on top of that. And then you're gonna take your iron and just gently press it down. Now you don't wanna move that around too much because you don't want the napkin to slip underneath. And you're just going to hold it for 5 seconds and then move it. 5 seconds, and then move it. And just do it over the entire piece of wood until you've covered the whole surface. And what this is doing is it's melting that cling wrap or that saran wrap right into the napkin and the wood and adhering it to it. And this works fantastic. No bubbles, no wrinkles. So I'm just gonna pull it up and have a look and make sure that it worked. And it did, it's adhered perfectly. I'm just gonna go over just once more, just to make sure. Always make sure you got parchment paper on top. Don't iron on right on the napkin. And that one's finished. And this one has no drying time. It is ready to go. Let it cool down and you can finish it off. The next method is a water technique. Now what you want to do is you want to put a thin coat of Mod Podge all over your project, not too thick, just a nice thin coat right to the edges. And then I have a plastic sleeve, and I picked these up at the dollar store, and they work perfect for this type of a project. You're gonna take your napkin, you're gonna lay it face down in the middle of that plastic sleeve, and then you're gonna take, I have a little bit just of water with a sponge, and you're just gonna wet that napkin until it's completely soaked through. And just get it all wet until it soaks up all the water. You can also use a spray bottle, which probably would have worked a little bit better because this is a brand new sponge and it's not pulling up the water very fast, but it's doing its job. And then you just want to take your napkin and just get all the wrinkles out of it. Just be very gentle because this will tear really easy. And then we're all ready for the next step. Now you want to get a piece of paper towel and just soak up all that extra water, being really careful on that napkin that it doesn't rip or tear. You don't want very much water on that, and just be really mindful that it's not wrinkling again, and it's all set. So then you're just going to pick it up. Now the nice thing about this technique is you can move it around. So if it's not exactly where you want it, you can set it down. As you can see, it's not centered where you want it. You can pick it back up and move it around. That's the nice thing about this technique, is once you put it down, it can be moved, where the other techniques, once it's down, it's down. And then just very gently, just rub over the top, getting all those little bubbles and wrinkles out. And then you're going to peel away that plastic sleeve, leaving the napkin down. And it's adhered right to the board. And again, if you see a little wrinkle or a little bubble, you can take that saran wrap again and just dab over the surface and get rid of it. And then you're just going to set this aside and let it dry. Now these are all dry, and I'm going to sand around the outside and get rid of all of this extra napkin, and it'll make them look nice and neat and tidy. And there you have all 5 different methods of decoupaging. Each one has its own purpose for different projects. Maybe you could get 5 pieces of wood and try each of these techniques yourself and see which one you like the best, and then try it out on your project. Okay, let's do a recap. So we have the standard method, just putting the Mod Podge on, leaving it wet, and then putting the napkin on top of it, and using a little bit of cling wrap to push all the bubbles and wrinkles out if that happens. I use this one quite a bit, always works really well. Your cling wrap method, this one works good. You have to make sure that you're doing it on something that you can get the iron onto flat enough to make sure that it adheres to the surface really well, but never any bubbles and wrinkles, always works really good. Glue stick method, this one is so easy and so quick. You just put the glue stick on, put the napkin down, use a little bit of cling wrap, press out the bubbles and wrinkles, always works fantastic. Water transfer method, this one works really well if you have to go around corners or angles and you have to shape something. This one works really good. And the iron-on method. This one's fantastic also, but you have to be able to do it on a flat surface where you can run the iron over the top of it, like tabletops, coffee tables, the top of boxes, that sort of thing. I enjoy creating my own customized napkins as it offers endless possibilities for personalized designs and DIY crafts. To begin with, you'll need a single ply white napkin. In my case, I had leftover Christmas napkins that were 2-ply, so I separated the bottom ply to get the single white ply. Then I'm going to place the napkin down and put a piece of parchment paper on top of it, ironing it on the highest setting without any steam. And this is going to prepare that 1-ply of napkin for the next step of our project to create our own custom napkins. Now that the napkin has been ironed and flattened to remove any of the creases, we're going to attach it to a piece of computer paper. I'm using some double-sided tape to secure the napkin around the edges of the paper to keep it in place. And once it's centered, we're going to press it down firmly to ensure that it's firmly attached. And then we're going to use some sharp scissors to trim around the edges. I love making my own custom napkins because I can create unique designs for all of my crafting projects. If I can't find a pre-made napkin that I like, I can simply design and print my own, and it's an easy way to make custom napkins that suit my personal style. After securing the napkin to the paper, I'm going to load it into my LaserJet printer, ensuring that the napkin side is loaded correctly for printing. If you only have an inkjet printer, you can still use this process to create custom napkins. However, you're going to need to seal the image to prevent running and smearing of your ink. Next, I'm going to carefully trim around the edges of the napkin, separating it from the computer paper. Once the trimming is complete, we'll have our very own custom napkins that are perfect to use in various DIY projects using the decoupage technique. For my project, I've taken 2 scrap pieces of baseboard and painted them using some chalk paint. Afterwards, I distressed the paint, creating a rustic appearance before moving on to the next step of decoupaging my homemade napkins. Before we begin decoupaging, I want to mention that we're going to be using the water decoupaging method. This technique is ideal for achieving a smooth, wrinkle-free finish when decoupaging with a napkin. To get started, I've placed a plastic sheet laid out and I've placed the custom napkin on it face down. Then I'm going to take a little bit of water and a cloth and lightly drizzle some water onto the napkin. You don't need a lot of water, just enough to soak through that napkin. After saturating the napkin with water, it becomes extremely delicate and you got to handle it really carefully. Spread out the napkin by holding its 4 corners and ensuring that there's no wrinkles or no creases. To make it blend in seamlessly into your project, I like to use the edge of my scissors to trim around the perimeter of the napkin. It's going to give it a ragged edge and allows it to blend in better when you're using it on a decoupage project. Trimming the edges of the napkin is crucial for me. It gives it a seamless finish. If you skip this step, the edges of the napkin are sometimes visible and make your project not look as nice. By trimming the edges with scissors, you can achieve a perfect blend with the napkin and make it look like it's a natural part of your project. The end result will be a beautiful decoupage project that looks neat and professional. We are now ready to apply the napkin to the baseboard. I'm going to apply a light coat of Mod Podge to the baseboard, being careful not to use too much. You don't need very much. Then gently place the napkin onto that Mod Podge and using the plastic page to smooth out any bubbles or wrinkles. The beauty of this technique is that it allows for some flexibility in your placement. So if you don't get it exactly where you want it the first time, you can gently lift it and adjust it until it's where you want it. This is a forgiving quality that makes this process less stressful and allows you to achieve the perfect placement of your napkin on your project. After using the plastic page to smooth out the napkin on the baseboard, use your fingers to blend it into your project. Gently press and smooth the napkin to make sure it sticks well and it looks like it's a natural piece of that baseboard. Now I'm going to show you the other napkin and step you through it. You can watch me work and it'll help you understand the technique and create your own decoupage napkins with confidence. After setting the project aside and letting it dry completely, it's time to apply a top coat. I prefer using a spray polyacrylic sealer over Mod Podge because it gives a smoother and more even finish. This type of sealer is perfect for adding a protective layer and giving your decoupage project a professional look. With a few sprays of the sealer, your project's going to be finished and ready to display. This is what we're going to use to make the sign today. I picked up this snowflake at Dollarama. It was $1.50, and this tissue paper, and I'm going to do a decoupage burning technique on this snowflake. And I found this piece of wood actually in the dump wood pile. It already actually had this nailed onto it, which makes a fantastic stand for the sign. And I'm going to do a couple different painting techniques on this too before I put the graphics on it. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is paint this all with a coat of black chalk paint. I like using a dark color as the base coat. You can use a stain or paint, but I like the real rustic look. So when I sand, that black or that dark color stain peeks through. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint this whole thing with the black chalk paint. Next step, I just have some candle wax. And I'm just going to rub the candle wax all around the outside, anywhere where you would think that the wood would look aged and kind of wear off the paint. I'm going to put some right down the crack there. And I'm also going to put a light coat across the whole top, just to have some colors show through. Now I want to kind of keep with the snowflake kind of color theme with the tissue paper. It's got a little bit of blue in it, a little bit of white. So I'm going to just use some acrylic paint. This is Copenhagen blue, and I'm just going to paint it over that surface where I just put the candle wax. The blue is completely dried. Now I'm going to take candle wax again, and you can see everything is a mess. I'm not happy unless I have paint all over me. I'm going to take that candle wax and again go over all the corners. You can be aggressive, put lots or little, just depends on what kind of look you're going for. I'm kind of going for a really rustic look, and I'm going to add some more of the blue, but I wanted a little bit of a lighter color, so I added a little bit of some white chalk paint and mixing that in with it, and then I'm going to put that over top of this. I think it's going to give it a really neat vintage looking piece of wood when I'm all finished. And I'm not worrying about hitting every place because I want it kind of to peek through when I sand it all down. So I'm just going to let this dry now. Now this coat's completely dry. Again, candle wax. I'm going to go all over, be really aggressive with it. I know this looks kind of sketchy, but when it's all finished, it's so worth it. Okay, now I'm going to take my white chalk paint and put the final coat over the whole top. Okay, this is completely dry. Now I'm going to show you a little trick that I like to do when I'm using my candle wax. I like to take my heat gun and I like to warm it all up so you're kind of melting the wax on each of those layers. And then I like to take a scraper or like a razor scraper, whatever you have that's handy. And then while it's still warm, we're gonna scrape off any of that wax, and it's gonna leave those different colors kind of popping through. So I'm gonna work away on that. Now the wax is still warm, and you can see I'm just taking my scraper and just kind of scraping along. And wherever there was any wax, it's going to scrape off. And you can be as aggressive as you want, or you can just do it lightly. Just kind of depends on what kind of effect you want to have on your wood. I'm going to try and get a real kind of rustic look on this. So I'm just going to scrape away quite aggressively and bring up all those different colors. And you can see here, see that wonderful effect that it gives? I'm just going to keep working away at it. I've got it pretty close to how I want it, but I'm going to take it outside and I'm going to take my sander to it so I can kind of sand around the edges a bit more. And then when I bring it back in, I'll show you the finished base for my snowflake sign. I got it all sanded and I'm really happy with the vintage chippy look. But I remembered I had a can of silver spray paint that I think is going to look fantastic with the tissue paper that I'm going to use on the snowflake. So I think I'm going to take this and just hold it really far away and then just give a light spray just to give little speckles of silver on it. Okay, I love the way that turned out. It just gave it a little bit of a sparkle sheen. It's perfect. Now I'm ready to work on the snowflake. I'm going to give it a coat of black spray paint first as the base, and then I'm going to layer a little bit of paint on top of spray paint before I do the napkin burning technique. The black spray paint is all dry. Now, if you're going to decoupage a tissue paper or a napkin, when you're using a dark colored base, the napkin will not show through as nice. So you want to make sure your top coat is a light color, so when you decoupage it on, your napkin will show up better and pop. Okay, the snowflake is all dry. Now we're ready to decoupage on the tissue paper. Now this will work with one sheet of a napkin or tissue paper, but I find if you use anything thicker than that for this technique, it does not work all that great. You need to have a really thin piece of paper to do the burning technique. I'm out in my shed, the door's wide open. Make sure if you're doing it indoors, it's well ventilated. Have a water bottle or a squirt bottle handy in case you have a flare up or a little dish of water. Just use the precautions because you are going to be using a flame. I'm going to decoupage with my Mod Podge mat, and I'm just going to put a light coat over all of the snowflake, getting right out to the edges. That's what's really important with this technique, is you get that Mod Podge right out to the edge. And then once we get this all covered, we're going to lay the tissue paper on top and make sure that we get all the wrinkles and all the bubbles out of it and have it nice and flat and smooth. If you put on too much Mod Podge, it will wrinkle and bubble, but you want to make sure that you have enough on that it's going to adhere properly. Okay, we're going to take that piece of tissue paper and lay it down nice and flat and press it right into that Mod Podge. Okay, and we don't need all of this extra tissue paper hanging off the edges to burn off, so I'm just going to trim around and get rid of all that excess tissue paper. I've got all the extra cut off, and now you want to take a pair of scissors or a knife and just poke a hole in all those spaces where there's a hole. Just make sure that you get it all the spots, and then we're ready to do the magic. Now, you don't want to let the Mod Podge dry. You want to do this while it's still wet. You're just going to take your lighter, you're going to start it, and then just watch it goes right in all around the edges. Watch your fingers. Make sure you're being really careful. And it might go out, and if it does, you just relight and start again. And this is why you need to have those little holes cut, because then the flame can get right into the middle of them. And isn't that so cool? Right edges right up, really nice and neat. completely done. And look how amazing that is. All nice and crisp and burned. I have a little bit of Mod Podge that's kind of dripped along the sides that I'll clean up. But other than that, it looks perfect. And I'm just going to put a coat of Mod Podge, just light, all over the top. And this is all ready for my sign. I'm going to do my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. This is the graphic that I'm going to use. It is available in my Etsy store. If you want to grab it, you can use it. It's already reversed. The file's ready to go. Make sure you use the code SAVE50 so you can get 50% off of it. And I've printed this off on my laser jet printer, and I'm just going to cut it to size that I need it for the sign and then apply it. This is sat and it's all dry, and now we're ready to rub the paper off. I'm just going to take my rag just so it's just damp enough so you can start to see the graphics, and then we're going to rub off the paper. All finished. I'm going to seal it up with a polyacrylic sealer, water-based in satin, and then attach the snowflake. I'm just going to put a light coat over the whole sign, seal it up really well, and let it dry. Polyacrylic is all dry, so I'm just going to apply some hot glue on the snowflake and attach it to my sign, and then it's all finished. And there's the sign all completed using the napkin burning technique to do the snowflake. I did some candle wax painting techniques, the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer for the graphics, and it created a beautiful sign for the winter. Let's turn this plain, boring light switch into something funky and fun. We're going to clean it really well. Make sure there's no oil or grease on it or fingerprints. Wipe it down with a soapy cloth, a 120 grit sanding block, and then wipe it down again, and we're ready to go. I have some really fun scrapbooking paper that I'm going to use for this, so I'm just going to cut it out a little bit bigger than the light switch. And because scrapbooking paper is so hard to work with, I'm going to show you how you can make it thinner and easier to work with. You're just going to take some packing tape and adhere it to the back of the scrapbooking paper and cover the whole back of the piece of paper. Overlap your tape so you make sure you get it covered completely and press it down really firmly. I'm going to use a little card that I have to press the tape right into the paper. This process is going to remove some of the extra paper off the back so it's easier to work with. And you're just going to really carefully just peel away that tape, and you can see that layer of paper come right off. This will make the scrapbooking paper a lot easier to decoupage with, and it'll be easier to bend around corners, and it will sit smoother on your project. And if you find that it's still a little bit thick, you can even do it again. I'm going to do the water technique, and you have to put your paper on a piece of plastic, put it upside down, and then completely soak it with water. These plastic sleeve paper protectors work perfect for this project. Make sure you get your paper completely wet. I've let the water soak in for about 30 seconds, and now I'm just taking a cloth and I'm just dabbing up all that excess water that was laying on the plastic sleeve and the paper. And I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to put a coat over the entire light switch. Make sure you get it all over the corners and the edges really well. Now you're just going to pick up that plastic sleeve with the scrapbooking paper on it and just center it right over your light switch. Make sure that it's even and press it down firmly, get all the wrinkles and all the bubbles out of it. And then I like to just use the card just to press it down firmly. Now I'm going to take my scissors and cut into each corner so I can fold them into the center of the light switch. Apply some Mod Podge and then just flip it over and make sure it sticks really well. And if you have the little corners that are too long, just snip them with your scissors. Folding these pieces in are going to make it look nice and crisp when it's all finished. I know all you crafters have all kinds of little bits and pieces of scrapbooking paper in your craft rooms or in your home. Get creative, and you can do every light switch and maybe electrical plate in your house. Now I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and just cut it out and then fold the edges down into the inside and make it nice and crisp and clean lines too. And it's all finished. We are going to let it completely dry. And I'm ready to put the top coat on. I'm using a polyacrylic sealer in a matte finish. I find it's really durable, and if you ever have to wipe it down and take off fingerprints, you can wipe it with a damp rag. You can also use Mod Podge if you want. I just prefer this sealer. It's all dry, and we're ready to put it back up on the light switch, and I love it. What a great way to add some funky fun decor to your room. I am loving it. I purchased this canvas at the dollar store. It's a 9x12 artist canvas, and that's what I'm gonna Mod Podge my project on today. I always have better results if I actually paint the canvas before I Mod Podge on it, and I want to make it kind of an antique-y look, so first coat I'm putting on some acrylic dark brown paint as the base coat. I'm trying to give my canvas a little bit of an antique age look to match my graphic. And now I'm going to put on a coat of my homemade black chalk paint. I find having the chalk paint as your base that you're going to put your Mod Podge on works the best over latex or acrylic. Now we're ready to apply the Mod Podge. I like using the matte finish Mod Podge, but you can use the gloss too. It works just as well for this technique for underneath. And you just want to put a liberal amount over the whole canvas. Now, I used my LaserJet printer when printing out this graphic for this technique. You can try using an inkjet printer, but sometimes the ink tends to run when you introduce it to the Mod Podge. Now you're going to let it sit and dry completely. Okay, and now we're ready to put the paper on it. The Mod Podge is completely dry to touch. And this graphic I aged and distressed with cinnamon. Now before you do the iron-on method, you want to make sure that you have it completely centered on your canvas. You don't want it crooked and then have to start from scratch again. So I'm just going to lay some parchment paper over top of the graphic and get ready to iron it on. I have my iron set to 6 without any steam. You don't want any water getting onto the parchment paper and getting through to the Mod Podge. And then you're just going to gently just iron over the whole graphic and paper until it starts to adhere. Just be patient and take your time and make sure that you don't miss any little corners or any edges. You want everything to adhere to the canvas. And what this process is doing is it's melting the Mod Podge onto the paper and fusing it together. I like to check it halfway through and make sure that it's adhering properly. So I just pick up the parchment paper and just kind of check around the edges and make sure that it's all not wrinkled and all the air bubbles are gone, and then put the parchment paper back on and keep ironing. And there you have it, all ironed on and sealed to the canvas. And if you see any little air bubbles or little wrinkles, just go back over it again with the iron. You're going to let the canvas completely cool down, and then you're ready for your top coat. And I'm going to use the Mod Podge matte as a top coat. Now the trick with this is to not put very much on. Less is more. So you just want to put a really light coat over the top of this and let it dry completely. If you put too much on, it has a tendency to want to bubble up again. So just very sparingly, just brush on a real thin coat over the entire paper. And there you have the iron-on method onto canvas using Mod Podge. And I think it's a perfect picture for a farmhouse style home. Okay, I'm going to make a sign with some scrapbooking paper, and I'm going to show you how you can decoupage with it and make it thinner so it's easier to work with and you won't have any bubbles or any wrinkles. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to put a quote on my scrapbooking piece of paper. So I'm going to cut it down to the size of a piece of computer paper so I can put it through my laser printer. I'm doing this step just so I can make it into a pretty sign. I'm going to put this through my LaserJet printer so I can put the quote on it. This will also work with your inkjet printer if you seal it with some hairspray. Now I'm going to cut my scrapbooking paper a little bit bigger than the actual board that I'm going to make the sign on. This technique that I'm going to show you will work on scrapbooking paper, any paper that's thicker, photo paper. If you're going to use a photo, make sure you don't use an original photo though. Use one that you've printed off on your printer so you still have the original copy. When you're trying to decoupage thicker paper, it really tends to wrinkle and have bubbles and it just doesn't lay very nice. So this technique will get rid of all of those problems. And what you're going to need is some packing tape, and I never fold the tape over when I'm finished with it so it's easier to get apart, so I'll struggle here for a minute. And you're going to cut it bigger than the size of the piece of paper and press it firmly down into that scrapbooking paper. And then the next piece, you're going to overlap it a little bit and lay it completely across the piece of paper again. And you're going to keep doing this until you've covered the whole paper. You're going to overlap it and then press it down firmly and cut it. Now the next step is to get a credit card or something that you can really firmly press that tape right into that paper and get all the bubbles and wrinkles out of it. Make sure it's adhered really well to the paper. Now you're going to start at the end of the last piece of tape that you just put on and be really careful. Get the edge up and then just slowly pull the tape away. And as you're pulling the tape away, you'll see that there'll be a layer of paper that will completely come off the back of that scrapbooking paper. And now you're going to pull the next piece of tape slowly. You don't want to rip it, just slowly pull it away and see all the paper that's coming off, and it's making it that much more thinner to be able to work with easier when you're decoupaging. And we'll just take off the last piece. And you're left with a really thin piece of paper that's way easier to work with and to decoupage with. If your paper still feels thick, you can do this process again. And now we're ready to decoupage it onto the sign. There are lots of different decoupaging methods. I'm going to show you the water method. I put my scrapbook paper face down on a paper sheet protector that I got from the dollar store, and you're just going to dab it with a wet sponge. You want to completely soak the paper. You want it nice and wet. And after it's completely wet, you just want to let it sit for 10-15 seconds and let all the water go right through the paper. Now, I've printed my quote off on my LaserJet printer. This is where you might have a little bit of difficulty if you used an inkjet printer and you've printed on your paper, as it may run. So you're just going to have to do trial and error and see if it works for you. A little bit of hairspray on the quote might help seal it. And now I'm just going to take a J-cloth and just dab it and get all that excess water off. And gently make sure that it's laying completely flat. There's no wrinkles or no bubbles. And you're ready to put it on your piece of wood. I'm going to take my Mod Podge matte finish and put a layer across the whole sign. Put a liberal amount. Fill your brush up a couple times. Make sure the wood's completely covered with the Mod Podge. Now you're going to pick up your plastic paper protector, and the scrapbooking paper will stick to it because it's got the water on it, and you're going to make sure it's exactly where you want it on the sign, have it centered nice, and you're just going to press out any bubbles or wrinkles. And I like to take my little credit card and just run it across the plastic and make sure that the paper is adhered really well to the board. This technique is perfect to use on anything. You can use it on signs, on jewelry boxes, on furniture, on coasters. The possibilities are endless. And now you know how to make your paper thinner to make it easier to decoupage. You can just imagine what you can use. Just carefully peel away that plastic sleeve, and you can see that it's nice and flat, no bubbles, no wrinkles on that sign. I'm now going to put a top coat of Mod Podge over the whole piece of scrapbooking paper, just a light coat just to seal it. Before you do your project, test it with a scrap piece of paper so you can get the feel of how you can tear away that paper before you start your main project. I've let it dry completely, and now I'm going to take my sanding block and just sand along the edge of the wood and the scrapbooking paper, and you'll see that it makes a nice clean edge. And that's how you can turn a thick piece of paper or photo paper into paper that's more manageable to decoupage with. I'm going to use this thrifted picture frame that had a painted picture in it as the base of my project. The canvas was painted with oil paint, so I took my sanding block and I sanded it all down so it was nice and smooth. And I taped off the picture frame because I want to leave it the natural wood color. I painted the first coat on top of the canvas with some black chalk paint, and then I'm painting some white chalk paint on top of that. I used the black paint first because that will cover up all of the oil-based paint underneath. Once everything was completely dry, we're ready to start our project. I picked these napkins up at the dollar store. They always have really beautiful napkins there, and if you keep checking back, they always bring in new ones all the time. When you're decoupaging, you only want to use 1 ply of the napkin. So I have taken off, these were 3 plies, so I've taken off the back 2 plies. Don't throw them out, I saved them for another project, but we're going to just use this 1 ply that has the flowers on it. I like to tear my napkin around the edges. When you're decoupaging, it just helps it blend in better on your project. And I'm just tearing around these big floral pieces and piecing it around my frame until I like the way that it looks. I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat. You can use any decoupage product. I prefer this one, it works the best for me. And you can also use a matte or a glossy depending on what you're looking for when you're completing your project. I'm just putting a light coat of Mod Podge underneath the area where the napkin is going to be, and then just another really light coat on top of it to secure it all in place. We're not going to worry about the little bits overhanging right now. We can clean that up when it's all finished. I've decoupaged my napkins all around the outside so it looks a bit like a border, and I'm going to put a quote in the middle. I'm going to do my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I've printed this off on my LaserJet printer, made sure to reverse the text, and I'm going to center it right where I want it, let it dry completely overnight, 24 hours, and then when it's dried, we're going to dampen it with a little bit of water, rub away the paper, and we're going to have a beautiful graphic on our project. I'm going to seal it all up with a polyacrylic sealer. You don't want to put much on, just a really light coat. If you apply too much of a top coat, it will bubble up on you. I prefer the polyacrylic sealer as a top coat over the Mod Podge. And there you have a beautiful canvas and upcycled frame. I'm going to show you how you can decoupage a picture right into a frame. I've taken the wood out of the back of each frame and I'm going to paint it with some white chalk paint. I'm going to show you how you can decoupage using an inkjet printer. I've printed off some adventure pictures of my husband and I, and I've printed these off on my inkjet printer on regular computer paper. I'll put it in the oven for about 10 minutes on the lowest setting, and then I'm going to seal them all with some hairspray. If you don't do this step when you're using an inkjet printer, when you introduce the Mod Podge, the ink may smear or rub off. I've applied 2 coats of the Mod Podge, letting it completely dry in between each coat, laid my photo into it, parchment paper, iron on the lowest setting with no steam, and we're ironing it right onto that wood. When you introduce the heat into the Mod Podge, it will soak into the paper and it will seal it right on, decoupaging it onto your project. I've let everything cool down. Now we're going to seal it up with a little tiny bit of the polyacrylic sealer. Don't introduce too much or it will bubble and wrinkle again. You just need a really light coat.
These are the napkins that I'm going to use to create my own custom DIY decoupage napkins.
And they're 3 ply. And they're beautiful. I love the spring floral print on them. I'm going to use the floral print, and I'm going to use the white part of the napkin also. The first thing that you want to do is take apart your napkins. Now this is a 3 ply, so I'm going to take all 3 plies apart. And the middle part in this napkin, it had a little bit of the ink run through, so I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to get rid of that one. I use them for cleanup. And I'm going to use the bottom one. Now this is a critical step that makes this process a little bit tricky. You got to get rid of all of the wrinkles in the napkins. If you don't, when you print it, you will print right over those wrinkles and you won't have a nice transfer of the graphic. So I'm going to put the napkin down with a little bit of parchment paper and just iron out all of those wrinkles. I find if you mist it with a little bit of water before you iron it, it actually really helps get rid of a lot of the wrinkles also. Now we're all set to put the napkins on some computer paper. This is just our plain computer paper. And we're going to put them on and cut them to size. I'm going to do 3 different ones today to show you 3 different graphics and the way you can use the one with the printed napkin also. Take a sharp pair of scissors and just trim all the way around the piece of paper as tight as you can to the paper. Now do not try to just put the napkin through the printer. It won't work and it'll jam up everything. Now I'm going to use some painter's tape and I'm going to tape the top and the bottom of the piece of paper. And I like to kind of stick it to the table too when I'm putting the painter's tape down, just so it doesn't make it so sticky when you're putting it on the napkin and it rips it or tears it. And there I got aggressive and I've already ripped a piece of paper, but that's okay. It should work fine.
Now you're going to take your napkin that you're going to use and lay it
As flat as you can, press out all little wrinkles or bubbles, and then push the tape down and seal it onto that piece of paper. Now I'm only going to put the tape on the top and the bottom. You can put it on the sides too, but mine goes through my printer just fine, just with the two pieces. And make sure it's all nice and flat. Now when you're putting your paper into the printer, you have to put the napkin facing down. That's the way that the paper goes through the printers. So you're just going to load it in and shut the door and get ready to print. And I'm using my LaserJet printer, and it works perfect for this technique. You can also use your Inkjet printer. You just have to be careful when you're decoupaging that the ink might run a little bit, so you might want to seal it with some hairspray. And there you have the 3 napkins that you can use to decoupage that are completely custom. Now I'm going to show you right now what happens if you don't have your napkin completely wrinkle free. You can see here there was a wrinkle that went right through those words, and when you pull it apart or you're going to put it on your project, you'll have that wrinkle show up and there'll be a space in between the words. So that's the tricky part, is to make sure that you have it completely flat and wrinkle free. Now I like just to cut that tape right off. You can try to peel the tape away, but I find it's really tricky and it rips really easy. So I just cut the tape off and you have your napkin all ready to decoupage. This is so fun to do because you can custom make your napkins into anything that you want, any font, any quote, any picture, and print them off and have fun with them. I picked this up at the dollar store, and it's a set of 2 framed pictures that are on a press board, which is perfect for this project. I love it because it's already framed and you'll have a complete picture when you're finished. And this is what the prints look like. I'm going to paint them with my homemade chalk paint. I find using the chalk paint as a base for this project works the best for the Mod Podge to adhere. And then I'm going to spray paint the frames. And I'm ready to paint it, and I'm going to use my homemade chalk paint. I'm going for a real rustic look feel, so that's why I'm painting it black for the graphics that I'm going to be putting on top of it. You can use a white background. Just remember, if you're using a piece of white paper, that it will show through in the back. So you want to make sure that you have the corresponding color on the base as you do with the paper. Now, as all of us crafters do, I rushed ahead and I painted it with it in the frame, and it was a pain in the butt. So I have taken the boards out of the frame now, and I'm going to put my second coat of chalk paint on it, and it was much easier. And these are the prints that I'm going to use. These were printed off on my LaserJet printer. I decided I wanted to age my paper with the coffee stain method, and now it's ready to be Mod Podged onto the board. Now I've taken my board, it has 2 coats of the black chalk paint, and then I took my sander and I really kind of distressed it all around the edges, just because that's the feel that I'm trying to go for. This technique is so easy because you don't have to worry about reversing text or rubbing off any of the paper. It's just real simple and easy just to Mod Podge it right on the board. And I think these are going to look great. Now comes the fun part. I use the Mod Podge matte finish, and that works the best for me. And you're just going to flip over your paper, and you're going to just take the Mod Podge with your paintbrush and just spread it over evenly the whole piece of paper. The trick is you don't want it too thick. When you have it too thick, then you're going to introduce wrinkles and bubbles. So just do long strokes and just cover the whole paper. And you have to work kind of quick because you don't want it to dry on you. And make sure you spread it right out to the edges and into all the corners. And it doesn't matter that I'm going over the edges a little bit because that's going to all blend in, and it'll help keep the corners and the edges down flat. Now we're ready to flip it over, and you're going to very carefully place it right where you want it. Make sure it's not crooked, make sure it's centered right on your piece of board, and then just take your fingers and just gently spread all the little air bubbles and all the wrinkles out of the paper. And don't be too aggressive. You don't want to rip or tear the paper, and you should be able to feel with your fingertips if there's any little air bubbles or wrinkles, and just smooth them out gently and just take your time and get it as flat as you can. And if you've put a nice even coat of the Mod Podge on, you shouldn't have any problems with any wrinkles showing through. And as you can see, it's laying really flat. No air bubbles, no wrinkles. Now, of course, the paper looks distressed, so it's going to kind of give it that look, but it's nice and smooth. And now I'm going to go on and do the second one. Now, if you don't have a laser jet printer, have no fear, because there is actually a couple steps that you can do if you have an inkjet printer to do this technique. Now, let them dry completely. And now we're ready for the top coat, and I'm going to use the Mod Podge, the matte finish again. Now, when putting the top coat on, less is more. You don't want to put a real thick coat of this on. You just want a nice thin coat and just long strokes from the top to the bottom, side to side, and cover that whole piece of paper. If you put too much Mod Podge on it, it will bubble up and it'll wrinkle again. So you just want a real light coat put on. Now, if you do find you do have a little wrinkle or a little air bubble, here's a little tip you can try. Take a little piece of Saran wrap or cling wrap, wrap it in a little bit of a ball, and then dab it and press all those wrinkles and air bubbles out. This works really well because you don't want to use your fingers because you could tear the paper or your finger would stick to it. So just dab a little bit of the Saran wrap here and there if you see the wrinkles, and it'll push it right out. And there you have the finished pictures. I spray painted the frames in a satin finish spray paint, and I think it finished them off beautifully. You can make your own graphics in lots of programs. You can use Canva, you can use PicMonkey, or you can even use your Word program. You can also use this method with photos that you've printed off on your laser jet printer. I hope I've inspired you to get out your Mod Podge and try this technique and make some pictures of your own. This is a project that I'm going to upcycle and do a fabric decoupage on the top of it. I actually found this on the side of the road, and it's structurally really good. The colors are really funky, but we're going to make it pretty again. And for this project, I'm going to be using the Chiseled Wedge by Zebra. I love their paintbrushes, and this one's perfect for this project. I'm going to paint this whole end table with 2 coats of pink chalk paint that I had left over from another project. And then when it's completely dry, I'm going to sand it down with this 220 sandpaper. And then take a damp rag and just wipe it all off. Make sure that there's no residue left on the top. The fabric that we're going to decoupage is this scarf that I found at the thrift store for $5.99. It was in the 75% off bin, and I love the pattern. The pink on the end table matched perfect with the scarf. When you are going to decoupage on top of a surface, you want to make sure you're painting underneath a lighter color. If not, it will show through on your piece of fabric and it will not look as nice. So having that light pink underneath will look really nice when we decoupage the scarf on top. Now we're going to be using a polyacrylic sealer to decoupage. You can use Mod Podge, you can use homemade Mod Podge, but I find using the polyacrylic, it's thinner and it just lays better into the material, trying to get a nice smooth surface. You also want to make sure when you're picking a fabric, you're not picking something that's really thick. A nice thin cotton, or like the scarf, or something that will be able to soak up that polyacrylic really well will work perfect when you're trying to fabric decoupage. You want to make sure you're putting on a liberal amount of the polyacrylic sealer. When you lay that fabric into that, you want it to soak right through into the top. Now, I've put a pair of gloves on, so when we get this exactly where we want it, now I've cut this piece of fabric just a little bit bigger than the top of the surface. You don't want to cut it right to size. You want the fabric to lay over the edge a little bit, and then I'm just going to smooth it out and make sure there's no bubbles and wrinkles right out to the edge. You'll know you've put enough polyacrylic sealer on if it's soaked right through the material. You want to make sure you have spread enough on the base coat that it's going to be able to come right up through the fabric. So that's what I mean by picking a fabric that's going to be absorbent and be able to take on all that polyacrylic sealer. If you're using something too thick, it will not be able to soak through. We've got all the bubbles and wrinkles out of that piece of material, and now before it dries, we're going to put a coat of the polyacrylic right on top of that fabric, making sure that we're spreading that polyacrylic right out to the edge. You want to make sure you have the polyacrylic right to the edge, even over a little bit, so it makes it easier when we're ready to take away that extra fabric. You can see how nice this water-based polyacrylic sealer spreads. I find with the Mod Podge, it's just a bit too thick to get it to spread really nice, where this will give you a nice, smooth, even coat. And next time you're at the thrift store, make sure you go over to the scrap fabric section or the bed sheet section, and you'll see all of the wonderful fabric that you can choose from to do this technique with. And what I like to do is when I find a piece of fabric, I'll take the fabric to the paint store, to Home Depot or to Lowe's, and I'll match a paint color that I love out of the fabric and just buy a little tester size, or depending on how big your project is, and match it all together. I was lucky this pink that I had left over matched this fabric perfect. We've got the first coat completely covering the whole top and then spread out to the edges a little bit. I put it outside in the sun and I let it dry completely. And now that it's dry, I'm going back with that 220 grit sandpaper and I'm just lightly sanding the top. And you'll see as you're sanding it, it's going to go really smooth. You'll see if there was any little rough kind of bubbles in it, this will take it right down smooth. I've got it all sanded down and then I wiped off any little dust or debris, and now I'm putting on a second coat, and again making sure that I'm spreading it right out to the edges. Now I think this end table needs some legs. I had these table legs in my stash, but I don't like the varnish that's on them, so I'm going to sand them right down and then attach them to the little end table. This is them all sanded down. I put some polyacrylic sealer on them. They're going to look great. I repeated this process 3 times, letting it completely dry in between each coat, and now we're ready to cut off the extra material. I'm going to cut a slit into each corner, and then we're going to get a really sharp X-Acto knife. Make sure you have a new blade so we can cut through this fabric really easy. Now this is why it was so important to take that polyacrylic right out to the edge, because it's crisp and it's dry now, and when you run the knife along the edge of it, it'll cut it nice and clean and straight. Hold that knife right straight up and down along the edge of that table and just slowly cut along, and I love this. It looks so fantastic. It's nice and neat and tidy and crisp. And again, you can see why you want to pick a fabric that's not too thick so you can get a nice clean edge when you're all finished. Now that we have all the material cut off, I'm going to take that 220 grit sandpaper again and give it one last sanding right out to the edge. If you have any little hairs of fabric that are left from cutting, this sandpaper will sand that all away, and we're going to then wipe it with a damp rag again and put on one last coat of the polyacrylic sealer, making sure that we're going right out to the edge. And that's how easy it is to decoupage fabric onto your furniture. Once the top was completely dry, I went back and I distressed the whole cabinet. I wanted a little bit of that orange to peek through because there was some orange in that fabric, and I think it was a perfect idea because it all kind of made it look like it was meant to be together. And how cute is this? A little tropical kind of boho feel end table that I created from a ugly looking table that I found on the side of the road. Today I'm going to show you how you can decoupage on your soap. This has been around for a long time, but you can make it modern and you can put quotes on them and it makes fantastic gifts. You can make these for different seasons, for Christmas, for Halloween, Easter, anything. The possibilities are amazing, and I'm going to show you today how you can do that. The first thing that you want to do is you want to pick up some soap and you want to get it the soap that has a flat surface. You don't want to buy the soap that has a curve in it because it makes it a little bit more difficult to decoupage on. So I picked up this ivory soap. It's flat, and we're just going to carve away the ivory so it can be nice and flat before we decoupage on it. Now, the easiest way to get rid of the lettering on the soap I have found is to use a sanding block and just scrape it along the edge of the soap, and as you're doing that, it'll just slowly scrape away until it's a flat surface. And it doesn't take very long. You create a little bit of a mess, but it smells nice, and you can see I have a nice flat surface to decoupage on. So I'm just going to finish up these other bars and get them all ready. Okay, I have them all finished and it's nice and smooth, ready to decoupage. And I'm going to use some napkins. I'm going to do all 6 bars so I can show you a couple different napkins that I'm going to use. And these are the ones, I love the prints on them. Now these are all 1 ply. I've already taken them apart. You don't want to do this technique with all the plies of the napkins. You want to take them apart so you only have 1 ply. And I also made some of my own napkins, and I did a wash your hands. And don't be gross, wash your hands. And these are custom made napkins, and you just cut them out a little bit bigger than the size of the soap. And I'll just show you what it looks like. I have 1 ply of napkin that I have created my graphics on, if I can find the corner. And I'm going to decoupage onto the soap. Now I'm just going to get the rest of these ready and cut them just a little bit bigger than the bar of soap. And these sometimes can be a bugger to find the corner. There we go. And that's just a little bit bigger. That one's ready to go. So I have these 2 custom napkins ready. And now I'm just going to cut. You kind of want to place it on an area of the napkin where you want where it has the best graphics. So I think that's where I'm going to fit this one in. Now, how this works is when you put Mod Podge on the top of this, it creates a waterproof barrier. So when you're washing your hands, you'll get the soap all from the back side, but this side will stay intact. So you'll always have your napkin on the top as a decor, and it'll eventually just get smaller and smaller, and you'll have just a little sliver of soap, and you'll still have the napkin on the top, which makes it fabulous because you can use it and it still be decorative. So I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat, and you just want to put a light coat of the Mod Podge on top of the soap, right to the very edge. Get it right to the edge because you want the napkin to adhere really well along there. And then you're just going to take your napkin and place it right where you want it on the bar of soap. Now this one has the circles, so I want to make sure that it's going to look nice and be all lined up. And then just pat all the little bubbles and wrinkles that you might get out of it, And then you're just gonna set it aside and you want it to dry completely. So I'm just gonna work away on these other 6 and finish them up. Okay, I got these all done. I'm just waiting for them to dry. And aren't they adorable? I think they're gonna look so cute in a bathroom. And these make fantastic gifts for teachers, for anything. And I'm gonna show you at the end how I tie them up to give them as a gift. Okay, so now these are dry, and you wanna take your scissors and you want to cut as close as you can to make a nice neat edge along the soap. And just take your time. Have a nice sharp pair of scissors and make it look nice and neat. And I'm just gonna work away at these and get a nice sharp edge on them. Okay, I've got them all trimmed up and they're all ready to put 3 coats of the Mod Podge on top. So you're going to put 1 coat of Mod Podge on, let it dry completely, put a 2nd coat, dry, and then a 3rd coat. You want a good thick layer of the Mod Podge on top of the soap. So I'm gonna work away at that. It's gonna take a little bit in between drying, and I'll be back when they're all finished. Now I've got the first coat of Mod Podge on all of these, and I should mention that if you have an inkjet printer and you're making your own custom napkins, when you introduce the Mod Podge, the ink may run a little bit. So a little trick, if you don't have, because I've made these with a laser jet printer and the ink will not run. So if you're using an inkjet printer and you're making your napkins, spray them with some hairspray on top of the napkin, let it dry, and then apply it to the soap, and you shouldn't have any problems with your ink running. And now these are ready for the 2nd coat. If you are buying soap that is not white, please be mindful that that's going to show through your napkins, because most napkins are transparent. So if I had a green bar of soap, the green would show up through this napkin and it wouldn't look as nice. So I think this project works best on a white bar of soap. Also, you can use the different types of Mod Podge for this project also. You can use the matte, you can use the gloss, you can also use the dishwasher safe one that would be really perfect for this project. But all work equally good. If you want to speed up your drying process a little bit, get out your hairdryer, put it on a low setting, and you can just blow it dry, and it'll make the job a little bit quicker. After you finish this, put them up on a shelf and don't think about them for about a week. And they're all finished. And if you'd like to embellish them, I love to put a little bit of jute around them. Put a little bit of faux greenery. It looks really pretty. Or you can just wrap jute around it, and I think it looks really sweet too. If you're giving it as a gift, you can tuck a little note in it. Or just stick them in a little wicker basket in your bathroom. Or stick these right on the sink for the kids. They'll get a laugh out of those. So grab some soap. Give this technique a try, because it's lots of fun. I'm going to make over a pickle jar, and I'm using 2 techniques with Mod Podge. I'm doing a decoupage and a medium transfer. This E6000 is fantastic. It bonds just about everything, and you just put a little bit on, dab it on, and stick it to the lid, and then let it sit for 24 hours. Put it somewhere where it's not going to get hit or bumped, and just let it cure and dry to the lid. Now we're ready to prep our jar. Fill a sink full of hot soapy water and just let it soak the label off. And we're ready to paint the jar. I'm using my homemade chalk paint recipe, and it adheres really well to the glass. You don't want to put it on too thick, just nice even strokes from the top to the bottom, and that works perfect. I'm going to put 2 coats of this chalk paint on this glass jar. I'm going to paint this first coat and then I'm going to let it dry thoroughly. And then I'm going to put a second coat on. And that seems to make a really nice base for the project. Now we're ready to put on the graphics. I use a medium transfer method, which is the Mod Podge. Now I had a hard time finding Mod Podge on Amazon and our Michaels is closed, so I bought this decoupage and it actually works just as well as Mod Podge and it's the same technique. Now I've made my graphics on PicMonkey. It's a paid subscription, but I use it almost every day, so it's worthwhile for me. And after I've designed my graphics in PicMonkey, I put it into my Word program, size it, and make sure you reverse the text. And now I'm just going to put a light coat all over the graphic. Not too much, not too heavy, just a light coat from edge to edge. When making your graphics, you also have to use a laser jet printer. This process will not work with an inkjet printer. And now we're ready to put the graphic on the jar. And you just want to put it on and smooth it out, get rid of all the air bubbles, any little creases that happen. And I just like to take my thumbs and just rub across from end to end and make sure that it's smooth all across the jar. The lid has dried for 24 hours, so now I'm going to take a semi-gloss black Rust-Oleum spray paint and cover the whole lid. Now we're ready to start the decoupage. I found these napkins at our dollar store. They were $1.25 for, I think there's 10 in there, and I really like the floral pattern on them. These napkins are 2-ply and we only want to work with 1-ply. So you have to make sure you take the bottom layer off the napkin. Sometimes it can be a bit fussy, but just try to find the edge and pull the 2 pieces apart. The next step is to tear out the image on the napkin that you want to apply to your jar. I like doing this tearing method because it gives it more of a kind of blended in seam when you Mod Podge it on the jar. And you just work away at all the images that you want to add to your jar and just kind of rip around the image, leaving a rough edge. And the edge of the napkin, I always take off the straight edge and kind of rip along the edge too, and it just helps it blend in better on the jar. Our medium transfer graphics have sat overnight and now I'm ready to remove the paper. So you just want to lightly dampen your graphic just so you can start to see the lettering come through. And then you just want to rub away all the paper. It just takes a little bit of patience, but just rub gently. And as you do that, you'll see your ink show through and the paper will rub off. Now we're ready to decoupage on our napkins. You just want to put a light coat of your Mod Podge on the jar where you're going to put your first piece of napkin, and just a light coat, not too thick, and just liberally apply it to the area, and then pick up the piece that you're going to add and just gently just tap it down. Try not to get any wrinkles, try to get rid of any air bubbles, push them out as you're putting it on, and that's all there is to it. I sometimes take my paintbrush in little areas where I've missed and just add a little bit more Mod Podge, press it down again, and anywhere along the edges where it just seems to be not sticking very well, just add a little bit of the Mod Podge to just guide along to lay better. Now you just keep working around your jar, adding your graphics as you go along until you have it the way that you think it looks nice and all blends in. I finished decoupaging all the napkins, and now what I like to do, this is a really fine grit, a 220 sanding block, and I just like to take it over all of the area of the decoupage just to take off little rough edges or little creases that I wasn't able to push out, and it just kind of makes it have a more smooth look. Last step is to apply a very liberal coat of the Varathane polyacrylic matte finish, and it just seals it up really nice. And there you have a pickle jar upcycled into a beautiful decor jar with decoupaged napkins and medium transfer graphics.
Okay, so here's the lampshade that I want to do. And actually the base of this lamp I found in the landfill. I can't imagine anybody getting rid of it. It is all solid wood and ornate and it's beautiful. But I want to perk up the shade, so I'm going to decoupage this bed sheet on it. I picked this bed sheet up at Value Village for $2.99 and I just love the 70s groovy feel of it, and I'm excited to get this on the lampshade. I couldn't believe when I found this bedsheet because it matches my craft pegboard perfectly. Okay, I'm going to measure the lampshade and see the width that I need the panels in. I'm not going to do this all in one piece. I'm going to decoupage separate panels on because it's easier to work with. And what's nice about this sheet is the width is exactly 2 of these squares. So I'm going to cut that for the width, and then I'm going to cut the length and then cut them into panels. Okay, I've got them all cut out in the width that I need, and now I'm going to cut them down into panels. And I'm going to do them with the 2 sections of the squares, and that'll make it so much easier when I'm decoupaging because you won't have so much fabric to work with. And that's the first panel that I'm going to start with, and you can see how it fits right on the lampshade. I'm going to iron all the panels so they're nice and smooth and easy to work with. And I'm just using a high setting of 6 and getting them nice and flat. And I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat. And when I start to decoupage, I'm going to have to push that fabric into all those pleats on the lampshade. when applying the Mod Podge, you have to use quite a bit because you want that to soak right through into the fabric so you have it adhere really well. So I'm applying a liberal amount, and I'm just going to do it in small sections. Do 4 or 5 pleats all at once, and then lift it up and apply some more. And when I'm applying the first panel, I want to make sure I have the edge right in the middle of the first pleat. And I'm going to flip it up and add some more Mod Podge and just keep working away. I found as I was going along, I got a little credit card, and that worked really well to help me push it into all those pleats really well, because you want to make sure that it's bonded really well in the middle of that pleat so it doesn't pop up. And also, when I have it adhered really well in those pleats, I take some Mod Podge and I put a liberal amount on the top. And there's the first panel, all finished, and I think it looks fabulous. Okay, now I'm ready to start the second panel, and I want to make sure that I line up the patterns as best as I can, and then put that seam right in the middle of that pleat. And then add the Mod Podge on top to seal it in and keep working away again. As I'm redoing my craft room, I've kind of been drawn towards all these funky, fun, whimsical colors, and I think it helps with my creativity. Now when I ended this panel, I had a little bit of excess fabric that didn't fit right into the middle of the pleat, so I'm just going to trim that off so it's flush right in there and start with the next panel. Now I'm finally almost done, so I'm just going to measure up the last little bit that I need to fit in and cut it to size and decoupage it in there. I tried to line and match the patterns as best I could. It's really hard when it's a little bit of a angle on the lampshade, but it fit pretty good and it looks pretty good, and with all the pleats it kind of hides any imperfections. Decoupaging is all about having fun. It's not about having it completely perfect, and I think I am going to love this lampshade. Okay, all finished. It used quite a bit of Mod Podge, but it adhered really well and the fabric is stuck really well to the lampshade. So now I'm just going to tuck in all the pieces around the edge into the pleats and give it a nice finished look. I'm just going to trim off some of the excess fabric just so there's enough just to tuck down into the pleats so it's not really bulky. Okay, I'm going to add some Mod Podge along that little bit of fabric and tuck it right up into the pleats. And as I got going, I was trying to use my fingers, and then I realized that my scissors, the point of my scissors would poke it right up into that pleat and make it nice and smooth and finished looking. And the finished edge looks wonderful. I really like it. And now I'm just going to do the top, and we're almost there. Okay, all the ends are tucked in, and now we're ready to add the finishing touch, and this is exciting. I found this bag at the thrift store for $2, a full bag, and it is the 70s pom-pom trim, and I'm going to put it on the top and the bottom of the lampshade, and I think it's going to look fabulous. I'm just gonna secure it with my hot glue gun around the top edge and the bottom edge. Okay, all finished, and let's get it on this lamp post and we can have a look and see how it fits into my craft room. And there it is, all finished. It looks exactly like how I wanted it to. It's kind of funky, eclectic, 70s vibes, and when I walk into my craft room, it just makes me happy. And that base of the lamp is unbelievable. I love it, and I'm so glad I was able to find it and rescue it and bring it here to my home. I thrifted this glass bowl for 79 cents, and you're going to need some Mod Podge. You can either use matte or gloss, and a couple napkins and a little paintbrush. The first thing I do before I Mod Podge anything with glass is I use an alcohol wipe. These are actually the ones that you can buy to clean your glasses, and they work really well for making sure that there's no grease or stains or anything on your bowl, and leave a nice clean working surface. Now you can use any napkins. I picked these up at the dollar store quite a while ago, and I'm going to use two different patterns, and you just want to use the top layer of the napkin. So you want to take the other two layers apart and get ready to put it on your bowl. And you want to cut your napkin so it's just a little bit bigger than the bowl itself. Now when we go to Mod Podge this on the bowl, you want to make sure the pattern is facing inside so you can see it on the inside of the bowl. And now we're ready to apply the Mod Podge. Now I find myself, I don't like to put any Mod Podge on the actual glass ball. I like to put it right on top of the napkin, and it will soak right through into the glass bowl and then adhere to it. And I'm just going to do very small strokes working towards the edge of the bowl. Be very gentle. You don't want to put too much pressure on and then rip the napkin. So you just practice. It takes a little bit of a knack to know how hard you want to push down and how much Mod Podge to put on. But as you can see, I have quite a liberal amount that I'm putting on, and I'm just working from the center of the bowl to the rim before it starts to go down. And now I'm going to start working down the sides of the bowl. Now with this project, we're going to embrace the wrinkles a little bit. You're going to get some wrinkles because the bowl is round and the napkin is going to have folds in it. It's going to have a little bit of wrinkles. I actually kind of like that look. So just take your time and then just work, always working down towards the bottom of the bowl. Don't bring your brush up. Just push the Mod Podge into the napkin lightly and push down. And if you have a little wrinkle or a little bubble, just work it out and work it down. You can do this exact same process on a glass plate also, and you wouldn't have as many wrinkles and as many little folds in the napkin because you're working with a flat surface. But because we're working with a round bowl, you're going to have a little bit of wrinkles and napkins. So don't think you're going to do this and then not have any. Now to make it easier to put the Mod Podge on around the last little bit of the rim, I'm going to put it on another glass jar so it sits up off the table and it's easier to press it down. And this is where you might see some of your little wrinkles show up in when you're, or creases in your napkin when you're applying the last little bit of the Mod Podge. That's okay. That it looks nice when it's all finished. Now I've let it completely dry overnight, and I'm going to use my 120 sanding block, and I'm going to get rid of all that excess
napkin around the edges, and I'm going to very gently sand it, making sure that I'm using the sanding block in an upward motion. You don't want to push it down. If you do, you'll pull the napkin away from the bowl. You want to sand upwards. And now the edge is nice and blended. You can see a little bit of white streaking from the Mod Podge. That's okay, because the next coat will cover all of that up and you won't see it. I'm going to take my homemade chalk paint and I'm going to paint the entire bowl over the whole outside surface. I'm doing this because I want to put the other napkin on top of it, and if I just put the napkin on top of it without the paint, you wouldn't be able to see and it would all mesh in and it wouldn't look very nice. So doing this white coat, it will leave a nice base for the next napkin to go on top of it. I've let it dry completely, and you can see the white shows through really nice on that pattern napkin. And I'm just going to take my sanding block, that 120 sanding block, and just lightly, in case there's little bits and pieces that are high that I don't want the napkin to catch on, just give it a nice light sanding. And now we're ready to put the other napkin on. And again, you want to cut this just a little bit bigger than the actual bowl. And you want to make sure when you're applying this napkin that you put the pattern to the outside so you can see it on the outside of the bowl. And now we're going to do the same process that we did with the other napkin. You're going to work from the center and just work your way down along the sides of the bowl. And again, you're going to have some little wrinkles and little creases by the time you get to the bottom of the bowl. That's okay. It looks fantastic when it's all done. This is something that you can just kind of play around with and just kind of get the feel of it. And if for some reason you've applied your napkin, you don't like the way that it works, you can always just put it in a hot soapy sink full of water, soak it off, and start again. And now I've let that completely dry overnight, and we're ready to take the sander again and sand off all those extra edges of the napkin, making sure you don't scrape it down. You want to scrape it towards the inside of the bowl so you're not pulling that napkin away from it. And it's all finished. Now we just need to put the finishing coat on. I like to use the Varathane water-based matte finish. I find it is nice and hard, it doesn't leave any brush streaks, and it's really easy to dust. Now this is not going to be dishwasher safe. It's just for decor, like I said before. You could do this project with the Mod Podge dishwasher safe product and it will work for you. That's up to you of how you want to use your bowl. And it's all finished and I love it. And I think it looks fantastic with the little scalloped edge on the bowl. And I love the way the two napkins worked really well together. And I did another one, the exact same bowl, but with the same napkins. And I did the rose pattern, and I love the way it turned out also. When I'm painting glass, I always like to use chalk paint. I find it adheres the best. Latex or acrylic always tends to peel. If your project is wood, then you can use latex or acrylic paint. One thing to keep in mind is if you don't paint your project, when you apply your napkin to it, you will be able to see through it and it'll have a completely different look. And you always want to paint your surface a lighter color than your napkin or your napkin will not show. I always have a tendency to just paint it white, and then when you put the napkin on it, you'll be able to see the napkin nice and vibrant. If you were to paint this bottle black, and then put the napkin on it, you would not be able to see the napkin. So I like to put 2 coats of the chalk paint on my project, making sure that it's completely dry in between each coat. And if any of you were actually wondering what decoupaging is, it's the art or craft of decorating objects with paper cutouts. It is the process of cutting out images and gluing them to any pretty surface and then coating it with a varnish. Some people call it painting with paper because the image you glue onto the item truly can look like they were actually painted. And I thought this was interesting. The word decoupage comes from Middle French decouper, meaning to cut out or to cut from something. As you learn and practice, decoupage is truly an art form, and you can turn something very basic into a very unique piece just using a decoupage medium. Okay, now we're going to get started with the napkins. Most napkins have 2 or 3 plies. You only want to use the top ply that has the image on it, so you want to take those other plies off. And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky. I find if I wet the ends of my finger when I'm trying to pull them away, it comes out easier. Next thing you want to do is cut your napkin down to the size of your project. You don't want to have to work with any more napkin than you absolutely have to, so cut it down to the size of your project. You can use all kinds of different things to decoupage with, but I find if you're just beginning, the napkin is the easiest. You can use regular computer paper, fabric, tissue paper, stickers, wrapping paper. You can get really creative, but when you're just starting out, you want to just start with a simple, easy napkin project. You can find so many pretty napkins at the dollar store. There's fabulous groups on Facebook that do napkin swaps, or you can buy napkins from members, or you can actually even make your own. If I can't find something that I like, I make my own. You always want to work on a napkin that is completely flat. You don't want any creases or anything that is going to cause any more wrinkles than is necessary. So I like to always press mine. I put it on a towel and then a piece of parchment paper over top of it. I just use a medium setting with no steam and just give it a nice press. By taking this extra step, it'll just make it so much easier when you go to decoupage on your project. I like to use the Mod Podge mat, but you can use any type of decoupage glue that you have. Okay, and the first tip that I have is just to apply a very light coat. I find this is the first mistake that beginners make, putting way too much product on their project. When you apply too much of the decoupage glue, it will wrinkle up and it'll bubble for you. So less is more, just a real light coat. And I like to do my projects in sections. You don't want to put your decoupage glue over your whole project and then try to get it all laid down properly. I like just to do little areas first. I like to take my brush along the top of the beginning of that napkin just to make sure that it has adhered well. Flip over your napkin, and right where you left off is where you're going to start to put your Mod Podge sealer on. And you keep repeating that process until you have finished the whole bottle. Mod Podge or any other decoupage product is a glue, a sealer, and a finish all in one. And a regular school glue doesn't have those properties. So if you want to have the best results, you always want to use a decoupage glue when you're trying to decoupage. There are lots of other different formulas also that Mod Podge makes, but today we're just going to focus on just using the Mod Podge mat. And once you get the hang of it, then you can start trying out some of their other products. The best way to learn how to decoupage properly is just to practice and practice and practice. If you don't have any glass bottles, you can always go to the dollar store. You can pick up the little wooden plaques or the little glass bottles there and give it a try, and then you don't have a whole lot invested into it. You can take the tip of your paintbrush and just press out any wrinkles or bubbles if any do show up. Just don't add any extra Mod Podge on the top yet. You want to keep all of it underneath. If you do find you're getting some wrinkles and bubbles, try not to lift the napkin back up after you've put it on the surface because it will tear really easy. One trick is to use a little bit of Saran wrap in a ball and just dab at those wrinkles. And as you can see, I'm just putting a really light coat of the Mod Podge on the surface. I'm also trying to do as much of this in real time so you can actually gauge how long it's actually taking me to do this, and I'm not speeding it up. I see so many people struggle with bubbles and wrinkles, and the main culprit to that is using too much Mod Podge when you're attaching your napkin. You just want a really light coat, just enough to stick it to your surface. And I'm not worried about matching patterns where the napkin ends and meets, because that's going to be at the back of the vase, and when your project's all done, it'll all blend in together and look beautiful anyway.
Now I've got all the napkin completely attached to the bottle. I'm just rubbing my fingers along just to see if there's any little high edges of wrinkles and bubbles, and it looks pretty good. And I'm just going to take the paintbrush just to seal that seam together and make sure that it's glued down really well. Now I just want to stick down the edge of the bottom of the napkin. I'm going to take a little bit of Mod Podge on my brush and then just brush the edge all the way around to make sure that it adheres to the bottle. Don't apply too much pressure because it can rip it really easy. You just want a light dab. And I'm going to do the same around the top of the bottle. Now it's very difficult if you're just beginning to go around edges. So what I've done with this project is I'm going to cut off pieces of the napkin and attach it around the neck of the bottle so we don't have so many wrinkles and bubbles that can be introduced. I'm just going to cut out some of the floral pattern from the napkin, enough of them to go around the whole neck. And then you can see it'll be much easier to mold it around the ribs on the bottle and have it fit in better. And I'm just going to place them where I think it's going to match the best. It doesn't have to be perfect because it'll all blend in when it's all done. I'm just going to find a spot and then just use a little bit of Mod Podge on my brush. Now when I'm doing this, I'll put a light coat on the neck of it, and then I'm going to place the flower onto the bottle, right where you want it. And then I'm going to take my paintbrush and just mold it right into that bottle. And you can overlap into the other part of the napkin because it'll all blend in. And this is all about having fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just is practicing, and sometimes when it isn't perfect, they look even better. And you can see how it's curved around that neck and it looks really good. And now I'm just going to kind of fast speed through this and apply the rest around the neck of the bottle. Now after you have all of your napkin applied to the bottle, set it aside, let it dry completely. Once it's dried completely, you're ready for your top coat, and I like using this polyacrylic sealer. You can also use Mod Podge. This is just my preference to use this polyacrylic sealer. Both work just as well. I just like the finish of the polyacrylic over the Mod Podge. I'm just going to apply some jute twines for embellishments around the neck of it, add a nice little tag, and we're all set.
I've been seeing lots of these upcycled tin cans into wall pockets or smashed tins or little hanging tins, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do mine today. Now my can opener, when I use it, it smooths the edge around the rim. If yours doesn't do that, you might want to take a file around the edge after you've taken the top or the bottom off so you don't have a sharp lip and you cut your fingers on it. Mine are pretty nice and smooth right now, but I am going to take the can opener around the rim just once more, just to push it down a little bit, and then we'll be ready to go on to the next step. Now you can use your hands to do this. You can squish the tin cans together. You can use a rubber mallet to squeeze them together. It's a lot of work and you have to have strong hands, but it can be done. I'm fortunate. My husband is a power sport mechanic and he has a vise in the garage. This makes really easy work of doing these smashed tin cans. I'm just going to put it in the vise and just slowly twist the handle, pushing that tin can together. You want to make sure you have some gloves on and some protective eyewear, and just take your time. And I'm just going to work away at just squeezing the bottom of that tin can together, moving it along the edge until it's sealed really well.
And like I said before, if you don't have a vise, that's okay. You can form these with your hands. It just takes a little bit of extra strength and a little bit of extra time, but it can be done. My coffee canister worked perfect. Now we're gonna drill some holes in it. You can decide whether you're gonna put your hole in the back to hang it or on the sides, but I like to take a block of wood and then put it underneath the tin can and drill into that. And you can just pick any size drill bit that you want for the string that you're gonna put through it. Now, tin cans over time, if they're not sealed properly, will leach rust. So I'm going to use a spray primer to seal these all up before I paint them. For my first project, I'm going to mount some of these smashed tin cans on a piece of wood. I've just got a brand new piece of pine and I want to put some of my homemade stain on it to make it look old and vintage. I took my knife around the edge and just chunked out some of the wood. I went at it with a hammer and I banged it and put some notches in it. Once I have all of the stain on it, I'm going to take a rag, wipe off the extra, and you're going to have a piece of wood that looks old and vintage and antique in just a couple minutes. And it looks fantastic. I've taken my tin coffee canisters out to my shed, sprayed them with that spray primer, and then I mixed up some baking soda paint. I love the texture that this gives to this project. Really easy to make, and these tins will probably take 2 coats, and I'll let them completely dry in between each coat. I find that step of adding that spray primer is a must when doing this project. If not, it might look okay for a couple days, but after that, I always see that rust kind of leach through. If you like that look and you want that vintage kind of age look on your tins, then you can leave it without priming. But these ones I wanted to keep nice and bright and white. I've printed off a couple fun quotes that I want to put on top of these tins. I've printed these graphics off on my LaserJet printer, and we're going to do the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. These coffee canisters are perfect for this method because there's no ribs in them, so when we're rubbing off the graphic, you don't have to worry about getting all that paper off in between each of those ribs. This technique will also work on the regular tin cans. It just takes a little bit more patience to get it rubbed off. We're just going to apply the Mod Podge to the graphic just with a light coat. You don't need very much. Just make sure you're covering all of the graphics, and then we're going to place it on the tin can, making sure it's centered exactly where we want it. All the graphics I'm using today for my projects are available in my Etsy store. Make sure you use the code SAVE50 and you can get 50% off all of my graphics and use these for your own crafting projects. This is the next day. They have sat, they're nice and dry. We're going to take a damp rag with a little bit of water on it and just dampen it so you can start to see the graphics show through and then start rubbing off the paper. I love this graphic. Long live vintage. I have all the paper rubbed off those 2 tins. Now I want to seal them up really well with some water-based polyacrylic sealer. Before I put the tin cans on the front, I want to add a sawtooth hanger to the back of that piece of wood to hang it on the wall when we're all finished. I'm now ready to mount those tin cans onto that piece of wood, and I just have a couple little screws and I'm going to screw them through the hole that I created in the back. We're going to add the finishing touches. I have some of this moss that I picked up at the dollar store. I'm going to put a little bit in each tin can and then add some faux flowers that I have, and I love the way that this turned out. The best part about a project like this is the tin cans came from the recycling bin, and it was just a scrap piece of wood that I had laying around, and how adorable did it turn out. We're gonna do some decoupaging with a napkin. I have 1 napkin that I've taken down to just 1 ply, and we're gonna cut it to size to fit the front of our tin can. So many possibilities with decoupaging these tin cans, so many napkins to choose from, or if you can't find a napkin that you're looking for, you can always create your own. I love to custom make my own napkins. I'm going to put this napkin on the tin can using the water transfer method. I find it's really easy for eliminating a lot of those bubbles and wrinkles. I'm just going to cut down a piece of that napkin to be the same size as the front. I'm going to lay it on a plastic sleeve
facing good side down. I've just got a little rag with a little bit of water on it, and I'm just dribbling it on that napkin until it's completely wet. I'm gonna take my fingers, just make sure I get all the bubbles and the little creases out of it, and then I'm gonna pick up that plastic sleeve after I put the Mod Podge on the tin can and lay it where I want it. This is a really forgiving way of decoupaging, because if it's not where you want it, you can pick it up and move it around a little bit. And I'm just going to use my hands to press it into that tin can, and then just carefully just peel away that plastic sleeve, and you're left with that napkin decoupaged on the tin can. I have a little bit at the top where it kind of ripped away, but that's okay because I'm going to put a fringe on the top of it. I love using a little piece of Saran wrap also to get rid of any bubbles and wrinkles that you may have. Now we're going to do the back side of it. Same process, dribble a little bit of water, put the Mod Podge on the tin can, and then lay it on and take off the plastic sleeve and use a little piece of Saran wrap to get rid of any of the bubbles and the wrinkles. We're going to peel away that plastic sleeve off the back, and we're left with a little bit of the napkin hanging off the edges. But I'm just going to take my scissors and just trim around the edges and then press it down with a piece of Saran wrap, and it'll all blend in beautifully. I just love this napkin. I found these at HomeSense. I wanted to add this fun trim that I picked up at the thrift store, the whole bag for $2, and I love the little green pom-poms on them. If you recognize it, it's the same trim that I put on my lamp in my craft room here. Hot glued it on. It looks adorable. I had this little latch that I had in my stash. I hot glued it on the back, makes a perfect hanger, and I filled it up with some craft supplies.
For today's project, I'm going to use these scrap pieces of wood that I've stained. I'm going to be turning them into shelf sitters. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give each of them a coat of my homemade chalk paint. I always like to paint underneath any projects that I'm doing a Mod Podge transfer on, because if you don't, you'll be able to see the wood through when you apply it onto the canvas or the wood. Now I've just printed off these two pictures of my husband and I from recent camping trips on our basic inkjet printer. It's an HP, it's base model, not fancy at all. My husband and I love camping and the outdoors, and I'm going to make these into little shelf sitters to put in our camper. The graphic that I wanted to make for this set, I wanted to print it off on a piece of aged paper. I coffee stained it, dried it, and then put it into my printer and printed off the graphic. And these are the three pieces that I'm going to use on the wood. My two photos and my one graphic printed off on the aged paper. Now I wanted to give the two photos that I printed out a little bit of an aged look too, like I did this graphic. So I'm taking some of my leftover coffee stain and I'm just going to dab it around the edges of the photo just to give it that aged look also. Make sure you don't get it on any of the photo so you don't run any of the ink. You don't have to do any of these steps on your photos. I'm just trying to get more of a rustic look for the project when it's all completed. If any of you are interested, my husband and I, last spring when COVID started, we took on a project of renovating a vintage pop-up camper, and we made a whole playlist of how we took the steps to fix it up to where it is now. So if any of you are interested, you can go and have a look and watch our episodes from that adventure. Now the first step to having a successful inkjet transfer is to put it in the oven on 200 degrees for 10 minutes. This will dry the ink and bond it into the paper so it doesn't run when you introduce the Mod Podge to it. And this will also dry the coffee stain that I put around the outside of the photos. And I also don't think that I mentioned that I'm just using plain computer paper. This is just the cheapest computer paper that you can buy from Amazon. Okay, these have been in the oven for 10 minutes and they've dried and the edges have kind of curled up a little bit. So what I like to do is put it between two pieces of parchment paper, and then I'm going to take my iron on the number 6 setting with no steam, and I'm just going to flatten them out so they're nice and flat and they're easier to work with on my project.
The next step is hairspray. What you're going to do is you're going to seal those two photos and those graphics with a spray of hairspray. Now you don't want to make it soaking wet, you just want to spray it so it's just damp on the top of the photos. And of course now I'm spraying it and the photos are flying all over. I probably should have just done one at a time. This is just another step to ensure that that ink is sealed right into that paper, so when you put the Mod Podge on it, it doesn't run or streak. I also like to flip them over and put a light spray on the back of the graphics and the photos. I printed off a fourth graphic so I could show you this other method. Another method that you can try after you've taken it out of the oven for the 10 minutes at 200 degrees is you can put a coat of Mod Podge on top of the graphic or the photo, and that will also seal it in if you don't want to do the hairspray. I found both of these methods work just as good. Now you're going to let that Mod Podge that you put on the top dry thoroughly. And once it's dry, you can cut it out to the size that you need for your project. Okay, the chalk paint has completely dried on these wooden blocks, and I'm going to give them a real good sand all around the edges just to give it a nice distressed look. Now we're ready to put on the three pieces that I used the hairspray technique on. I'm going to use my Mod Podge in a matte finish. You don't have to use a matte, you can also use a gloss if that's what you have on hand. You're going to flip your graphic over to the back side, and you're going to put a liberal amount of Mod Podge on the back of that graphic, just kind of from edge to edge, side to side. You don't want to put a whole bunch on it. You don't want it all gobby and thick. You want a nice thin layer covering the whole piece of paper. I find if you put it on too thick, you will get bubbles and you will get wrinkles. Then you're going to flip it over, place it right where you want it, make sure it's centered, make sure it's even, and then you're going to just take your fingers and just press it down gently. Make sure you get out all the little wrinkles, all the little air bubbles. You don't want to press too hard. You just want to take your fingertips and just gently rub over the whole piece of paper. And as you can see, it went on nice and flat and smooth. And now I'm going to do the other two photos that I also used the hairspray technique on. Now this is the graphic that I put the Mod Podge on the top. You're going to use the exact same method as you did with the hairspray. You're just going to put a liberal amount of Mod Podge all over the paper, spread it from corner to corner, not too thick, because if you do put it too thick, you'll get lots of wrinkles and bubbles, and spread it out. And then you're going to flip it over and press it down on the wood and press out all the little wrinkles, all the little bubbles, and make sure it's laying very flat on the piece of wood. And it laid down nice and flat with no bubbles and no wrinkles. Now you're going to let everything completely dry. Now we're ready to put the top coat on these. You're just going to take your Mod Podge and just put a light thin coat all over the whole top of the photo. Now you don't want to put too much on this. Less is more. You want just a nice light coat just to seal it. If you put it on too thick, it will bubble up and it will wrinkle again. As far as using the hairspray method or the Mod Podge method, I actually haven't really found there was that much of a difference, and they both worked really well for me. I haven't found doing this technique to have any problems with any of my ink running or streaking at all. And another little trick is get a piece of Saran wrap, and if you do have any bubbles or any wrinkles that do show up when you're putting this Mod Podge on, just press them down with the Saran wrap. It won't stick to the paper, and it won't stick to the Mod Podge, and it won't make your fingers all goopy. Now, this step is completely optional. I just like to seal all of my projects with some Varathane. This is water-based, matte finish. I've let the Mod Podge completely dry, and I'm just going to put a light coat of this Varathane over the whole picture. It just gives it a little bit more durability, and it's easier to dust, and it seals it perfectly. This product is also non-yellowing, so you don't need to worry about your projects discoloring. And now here's another tip. This is the block that I use the Mod Podge technique on, not the hairspray. I have not tried this technique using the hairspray. It might work fine. I was just afraid that it might go sticky and gummy, but you're going to set your iron at 6, and then you're just gently going to press down, and that Mod Podge will melt, and it will get rid of all your bubbles and wrinkles. If you've used this technique with the hairspray, let me know if it worked for you. I also wouldn't try this method if you've put the Varathane on the top. And I love these. These turned out amazing. I can't wait to put them in my camper. I'm actually going to probably start using my inkjet printer more. I didn't have any wrinkles, any bubbles, and my ink after using these techniques never ran, never streaked. So get that inkjet printer out and try this technique with Mod Podge. These are the napkins that I found at Dollarama. They're a 3-ply floral print napkin, and I think they're just beautiful. And these are the antique table legs that I found in the dump. I actually have 2 of them, so I'm going to make 2 signs today. The first step is to remove all the layers of the napkins. These are, like I said, a 3-ply, so you'll be taking off 2 layers of the white napkin before you decoupage it on your project. Now this table leg, I had already painted it with black chalk paint and then white chalk paint, and then I sanded it, and that's when I ended up putting it in the corner of my shed and not doing anything with it. So the first step before you decoupage is to make sure that you don't have a straight edge on your napkin. You want to rip away so you have kind of a rough edge that you're going to butt up your next napkin to. It'll just give it more of a natural look. Now we're ready to decoupage. I'm using this decoupage mat by DecoArt. It's exactly like Mod Podge. I had a hard time finding Mod Podge when everything was closed, so I bought this, and I've been very happy with the results of it. And you're just going to put a light coat. You don't want it too thick, because I find if you put it on too thick, you're going to get a lot more wrinkles. Just a thin coat, enough to adhere the napkin to your project. Center it where you want it, and then just gently just tap it down and try to push out all those little wrinkles. I just use a really light hand and just carefully smooth it all out. I have yet to create a perfect decoupage project, and I've been doing this for a long time. I kind of sometimes embrace the wrinkles. I think it just kind of gives it a little bit more character, and especially for this design that I'm using now, I actually want it to be kind of wrinkly and kind of vintage looking. Now we're ready to butt up the next piece. So once again, you're going to open up your napkin and you're going to remove the 2 plies before you put on the 1-ply napkin. Match up the pattern as best as you can so it looks the most natural. And then once you figure out where you want it, you're going to rip that edge so it looks more natural, and will blend in together with the piece that's already been decoupaged. I'm not speeding this process up so you can actually see the whole process of me putting this on. I find it's easier, and then I can show you all my little tips and tricks as we go, instead of doing a fast forward or a time lapse. Put another light coat of your Mod Podge on, and this one I actually even take the little edges from the first piece and make sure I put a little bit of Mod Podge on them before I put down the next napkin. Blend the two pieces together with your finger and just kind of tap down and make sure that both of those edges are sealed really well, and then just lightly press the rest of the piece down. I sometimes find the Mod Podge, when you're putting a light layer, it kind of dries, so just add a little bit here and there wherever you need it, and I'm going to seal these two edges together so they don't lift. Now I actually forgot to rip this little edge, so I'm gonna go and just remove some of that edge before I put on my last piece of napkin. I was going to grab another piece of napkin, and I thought, that's kind of silly. I can just use a piece off of the bottom. Waste not, want not. So I'm just going to rip a little piece off right here. It's already got a ripped edge, and it's all ready to be put on. After you've got all the napkin put on, you want to put a liberal coat of Mod Podge over the entire surface that you've just done, and then you want to let it completely dry, probably for a couple hours. And then we're ready to sand. I'm using an 80 grit because I kind of want a real distressed look on this. So I'm gonna sand all around all of the edges to remove all that extra napkin. And then I'm going to take the sander right across the whole piece actually, and then if there's any little wrinkles or any little bubbles, it's actually going to take it down to that white and maybe show even through a little bit of that black paint from the original piece that was painted on the table leg. Make sure you've really let it dry completely, because if you sand before it's been dried completely, you're going to rip right through that napkin and have an awful mess. So I actually let this sit out in the sun for a couple hours before I even attempted to sand it. Now isn't this fabulous? Look at all the texture in it. You can see this, the paint peeking through here and there, the distressed edge, and even the flowers have kind of distressed a little bit, and it makes it look really vintage, kind of chippy and old, like it was around for 100 years. Now because this sign might be outside, I'm going to put a really good coat of Varathane matte finish on this, and I really like this one. It doesn't yellow, and it gives it a nice hard finish that you can dust or wipe off if you need to. You can use Mod Podge to seal it if that's what you like. This is just my preference of how I like to seal all of my projects. Okay, now we're ready to make a couple signs. I am using my decoupage mat from DecoArt, the same product that I used for my decoupage, and I'm using it as an image transfer. It's super simple, super easy, and the results are awesome. I find it gives it nice crisp graphics, and it also sometimes they're not perfect. You might rub off little bits and pieces here and there, but that's okay for this sign because I want to have it have the rustic look. Little tip when you're putting these signs together, take your time, make sure they're straight, make sure they're even. I've had so many projects where I've put stuff together, I haven't taken the time and I haven't measured, and then I remove the graphic and remove the paper and my graphics are crooked. So just take your time and use some patience. And now I'm going to start the second sign. The thing I like about this technique is the possibilities are endless. You can make any sign, any saying, any photo, and use this, and you don't have to buy a stencil for each sign, or you don't have to use a Cricut and cut out vinyl. All it takes is paper and some Mod Podge. Now comes the fun part. I actually found this chain that was attached to these two little wrenches in the dump, and I knew I could probably use both. And these are little, they're kind of like staples. I think they're actually for making fences. I'm not 100% sure, but I found them at the hardware store, and I thought they would work perfect to attach the chain to the signs. I've cut the chain to the length that I wanted and looped through those little staples, and then I'm just going to hammer them into the top of the sign and the bottom of the table leg. I love this look, and it's so easy to attach to the sign, and it just kind of gives it that old vintage feel instead of just using a piece of rope to tie them together. Now we're ready to work on the signs. I'm just going to dampen the whole sign with water just until you can start to see the graphics show through, and then you're going to rub away. And I'm going to put another coat of the Varathane on the sign to seal it up. And a coat of Varathane on the other sign. I really like the font of this one, this Vintage Garden. I think it really looks nice with all the vintage looking flower pattern on the table leg. And there you have a beautiful fresh flower sign, all made from pieces from the dump. I think this one might be my favorite. I really like this font, and it just kind of gives me that English garden feel. This is a little jewelry box that I picked up at our local thrift store. They're quite easy to find. I see them all the time, these little small ones lined in the little velvet material in the middle. And I picked this one up for $3.99. I always like to take the material out of these. They always seem to be dusty and dirty and sometimes stained. And I like to paint the whole interior. So this just takes a little bit of patience. Just use a little screwdriver or little scissors and pull all that material out. Sometimes after pulling it out, you'll have a little bit of glue residue. I just wet it with a little bit of water and then it scrapes right off, quite easy. Now I take my sanding block, this is an 80 grit, and I make sure I give the whole jewelry box a really good sanding. It's kind of got quite a thick varnish on top and the paint doesn't like to adhere to it very well. So I just like to make sure that I roughen up the surface quite good before I paint it. Now I like to take a damp rag and completely clean the jewelry box really well. Get all the little dust and all the little bits of paper out of it. Make sure it's nice and clean before we're ready to paint. I like the look of the distressed edges on these projects, but that's a preference to you. You don't have to sand this if you don't want to. You can just leave it as is. I just prefer the look of the edges sanded and making it look a little bit more rustic and chippy. It's all sanded and ready for me to put on the graphics. I love lining the drawers with scrapbooking paper. I found this sheet of Mickey Mouse themed scrapbooking paper at Michael's, and that's what I'm going to put on the inside. So I'm going to measure it, cut it to size, and then decoupage it on the inside of the drawer liners. Okay, now we're all ready to decoupage these into the drawer liners. I like using the Mod Podge matte finish to glue these into the bottoms of the drawers. You're just going to put a thin layer of Mod Podge over the entire surface that the scrapbooking paper is going to go in, and press it in firmly. Get all the air bubbles, all the little wrinkles out. Make sure it's down really well, and then let it dry. I made the graphics in my graphic program. Now I'm just going to cut them to size. You have to make sure when you make these graphics that you reverse the text, because if you don't, when you put it on your project, it will be backwards. This little graphic I'm going to put on the inside of the door. When I removed the little mirror from the inside of the lid, it had two grooves that were in the wood, cut into the wood. So I'm going to position this so it sits in between those little two pieces of wood, so it looks like it was meant to go there. Okay, now I'm going to use my Mod Podge matte finish, and I'm going to put a light coat all over the graphics and then put them down on the wood and make sure I get out all the little air bubbles, all the little wrinkles, press it down really firmly, and then you have to let them sit for 24 hours. Okay, now we're ready to see how this is going to turn out.
You're going to take a damp rag and you're going to just gently wet it until you can just start to see the letters come through. And then you're going to rub all of the paper away. And while you're rubbing the paper, you'll expose the graphics underneath and they'll stay on your project. Imagine all the possibilities that you can do with a project like this. There's so many scrapbook papers. There's so many quotes that you can use. You can just use your imagination and make so many beautiful little jewelry boxes. And this is what I'm going to use for my top coat. Varathane water-based, satin, crystal clear, non-yellowing varnish. And it works perfect and makes it really durable and easy to wipe and dust down if you need to. I'm just going to put a light coat over the whole jewelry box and the inside of the drawer liners. And there you have a beautiful handmade, upcycled jewelry box. Perfect for a little girl's room, little boy's room in a Mickey Mouse theme. Imagine all the little treasures that they can store in this little jewelry box.